Namaskar and welcome to the virtual roundtable conference on drones as a new security challenge. We are still awaiting two of our speakers to join in. We'll be starting the session shortly. I request all of you to please keep your the mic on mute button. We'll start as soon as possible.
We are waiting for Dr. Ellie Carman and Professor Kamakoti. If you are here, if you have logged in, please indicate. चेक करो वो लोग आए हैं कि नहीं है।
A very warm welcome to everyone. Welcome to the virtual roundtable conference on drones as a new security challenge. I would request Captain Alok Bansal, Director, India Foundation, to deliver the welcome address, and we hope that our remaining two speakers will join in the meantime. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this roundtable interaction on drones as a new security challenge. On 27th June, just after midnight, Jammu airport was hit by two explosives, one at around 1:30 and one another 7 to 8 minutes later. And with that, a new security challenge emanated. The two explosives are believed to have been dropped by drones. And this created a new challenge for the security forces. And what is even more important is, at a time when we are looking at drones at a security challenge, there are a large number of people where there are a large number of valid applications where drones have enormous use. In fact, on the same very day, on 27th June 2021, the Economic Times carried a center page op-ed, which was titled Tech Flight with UAVs. Now, that article said it is now no longer a question of whether thousands of drones will dot the Indian skies, but when. So that actually sums up the reality that today it has become so easy that you cannot go to a wedding party or any big party where there is no drone flying. Now, with this sort of a challenge, targeting high security establishments becomes that much more easier for a terrorist or for any non-state actor which is intending to target a state high security target. And so much so that immediately after what happened in Jammu, we saw another drone which was sighted at Kaluchak, which was, of course, fired at by the security forces and forced to return. But the danger is so much that the Chief of Army Staff, General Naravane, was forced to say that the proliferation of drones to the extent that they are now a do-it-yourself project at home is a challenge and will increasingly be used by the state and non-state actors in the future for all aspects of combat. And this is what is important, because today a drone is such an easy thing that people can actually order component and assemble one at home as far as a low-end drone is concerned. So now we start with this particular roundtable, and our first speaker is Group Captain Kishore Kumar Khera, who served as a fighter pilot in the Indian Air Force for over 33 years. He served in the Plans and Operations Directorates at Air Headquarters, as well as in the High Commissioner of India at Dhaka, Bangladesh. He's also been a research fellow at IDSA. So without wasting much time, I will now request him to start the proceedings with his opening talk on drones in hybrid warfare. Over to Group Captain Kishore Khera.
Thank you so much for your introduction, very kind introduction, very long one. So I like to refer to myself in a single word, that is a soldier. A soldier is always a soldier. Coming to a very interesting topic today for the round table. First of all, I would like to thank India Foundation for organizing this, and specifically Captain Alok Bansal for bringing to fore a very challenging topic. Before we move further, let's recap at 4 or 5 events that have happened in the last couple of years. Starting with the 14th September 2019, Aramco oil processing facilities deep inside Saudi Arabia struck by a score of drones and missiles. It knocked out 5% of world oil processing capacity in single strike. 3 months later, January 3rd, 2020, United States unmanned aerial vehicle assassinated Major General Qasem Soleimani of Iran while visiting Iraq outside Baghdad International Airport. 6 months later, a conventional fight between two sides, Azerbaijan and Armenia, saw extensive use of unmanned aerial vehicles that knocked out the air defense shield over a very potent and capable army, thus forcing them to retreat. Closer home, the Jammu attack has just been mentioned by the director. And last week, US forces in Iraq were struck for the 6th time by a explosive laden drone. What are all these things indicate? They indicate that drones are at the forefront for kinetic war application. I will split my talks in 3 different sections. First, I touch about characteristics of hybrid war, then attributes of drone that make them suitable for this kind of a war, and then how intertwining of hybrid war and drones, and what are the security challenges and implications for an establishment, a state. First of all, what is hybrid war? There are 2 issues related to this. First is the term hybrid war, and second is the phenomena called hybrid war. The term hybrid war is a new one. It's gained prominence in this century, last couple of decades or so. And often it is interchangeably used with gray zone, non-linear war, unrestricted war, no peace condition, new war, mutating war, parallel war. All these are terms which are used depending on which part of the world you are in. Primarily, it means that there are multiple prongs of war, and all of these are not necessarily kinetic. That means it's a mix of kinetic and non-kinetic means of waging war. Now, if you look at the history of warfare, war hybridity is not a new concept. You go back to Kautilya's Arshad or Kamandaka Nitisar or Thirukural for that matter. Tenets of current hybrid war are enunciated there in some form or the other. Although the term hybrid war is new, but the phenomena of hybrid war is not. How is hybrid war different from wars of the last century? Essentially, as far as the nature of war is concerned, it is exactly the same, continues to remain violent. But war characteristics have changed. They've transformed. Earlier, it was a force on force, well-defined conflict with a specified beginning and often a well-marked end. And every so often in a very, very defined geographical bound area. All this has changed. While force on force conflict still retains a sizable portion in the current context of hybrid warfare, but its salience has reduced significantly. Other facets of warfare have gained prominence, and the most distinct feature of these facets is absence of an announced beginning and absence of an announced end. So is the case with area operation. War declarations are passed. Time and space of conflict are limitless. The aggressor can strike wherever it can reach, and technology has played a major part in this aspect. This has brought 3 basic changes in the conflict scenario that we witness in today. First, the actors in the conflict. Erstwhile, it was primarily state versus state. Now, states, non-states actors, state-sponsored non-state actors, regular combatants, irregulars, non-combatants, conventional weapons, unconventional systems, kinetic, non-kinetic means. Whatever one can lay his hands on is used in this kind of a warfare. Non-state actors specifically hitherto came into being and fought against a specific state. But that has changed. Now, non-state actors, multiple of them, have international footprint. And states, a large number of them, do find it easier to use non-state actors as hybrid war tools. The second change that has taken place is because of the technology, which has extended the kinetic capability in terms of range and precision. This has expanded the battle space that was normally restricted to land borders or coastal areas. Now all assets that any entity holds anywhere on land, water, airspace, cyberspace, and it can be targeted. So defending one's assets is an onerous task. The third aspect that has come to fore is the time compression. No longer months and weeks are available to plan a kinetic action or take action to achieve your goals. The situation changes rapidly as mobility and communication speeds have grown exponentially, especially in last 2 decades. Reaction time available now is in terms of hours and at best days. So everyone must be ready always and every time. If you have this kind of a defensive mindset, then the cost of defensive operation goes up substantially. Now, these three basic changes that have come into fore have given tremendous advantage to the first mover or the aggressor. The balance was always there between offense and defense because you needed more power to create an offensive action and less to defend yourself. But now, with these three changes, the balance has definitely tilted in favor of the aggressor, and offense takes precedence over defense anytime. In the summation in the current genre of hybrid warfare, you can say that force on force conflict has changed to system on system contest. From an event of war, it has changed to a process which is continuous. Now, coming to the second aspect, drones. Drones, unmanned aerial vehicles, unmanned aerial systems, multiple names are used. But it is important to understand how and why these UAVs have come to the forefront in kinetic force application. Looking back about a century, as soon as man could fly, aviation found its way in military domain. The first task was to rise in the elevation, have a bird's eye view, whether it was hot air balloon or heavier than air machines. The first task given in military was reconnaissance. Look across the line, observe and decipher what the enemy is planning. The next task the military aviation was given was use this platform to drop weapons, from handheld weapons, throwing grenades, to air-launched weapons. We've come a long way in this strike road. And later, when the aircraft capability increased, the air defense role to shoot down enemy aircraft also came into being. So it was reconnaissance, strike, and air defense role, how the manned aviation grew in last century. UAVs are following exactly the same trajectory, only at a faster pace and with greater accuracy. These refined attributes are an outcome of technical advances that we have seen in three basic spheres: computation, communication, and sensor fidelity. UAVs have practically pushed out manned aircraft from the reconnaissance and surveillance because of their low cost of operation and low risk. Gradually, UAVs are increasing their share in the strike role. It will take a while for UAVs to undertake a competent air defense mission. Probably in the coming decade, we will see that too. How are UAVs playing a role in hybrid war? First of all, the battle space expansion has put a premium on information. A better informed one will always be better prepared. And there is no better way to gather information than a UAV. With sensitive sensors, long reach, long endurance, UAVs can keep a vast area under surveillance and help decipher plan on the ground or in the maritime domain. A number of UAVs are basically focused on this arena. Yes, there is a threat to UAV should it transgress into hostile airspace, but it's relatively small radar cross-section, small visual, audio, thermal signature. They act as a natural defense. In case it is engaged by air-to-air or air-to-air missiles or guns, the cost implications are invariably against the defender, unless they manage to shoot a high top-end model of a unit. So for a defender, it seems a lose-lose situation. More importantly, being unmanned, there are no personnel at risk. The operator is sitting miles away from the battle area. that becomes a defining parameter for pushing the envelope outward in the usage of UAVs for recce, surveillance, and strike. Coming to the strike, ability that has come to fore is precision targeting. Through the televised war of Gulf War I, everyone saw the impact of precision targeting, and battlespace dynamics has changed ever since. With manned aircraft, there are only a handful of states that could undertake precision targeting. India dropped its first precision weapon in anger in Kargil War. That is just at the turn of the century, 1999. But now a commercially available UAV equipped with a GPS can deliver a packet at a predefined location with precision. And it's not difficult to replicate a packet with an explosive. So UAVs practically give precision targeting capability to anyone who can spend a few thousand rupees. Well, the range of such small UAVs at present is limited to a few kilometers, and payload is also restricted because of low capacity batteries, and most of these are battery operated systems. But the larger ones have bigger capability and longer range and longer endurance. Even a small explosive of a couple of kilograms delivered precisely can be devastating. In fact, the Jammu attack that was mentioned in the opening address, Indian Air Force was actually very lucky to have escaped without a major damage. It is not that UAVs are end all and be all. They have their own weaknesses. They're low speed, low maneuverability, low reliability, and high reaction time, because of the time taken for communication between the UAV through either directly line of sight or through satellites to the ground control station and back, and then executing those actions. So time lag is the one which is restricting UAVs from the air defense role primarily, but it plays a role in other aspects as well. And it is not all rosy for UAVs. US Reaper was shot down by Iran over Persian Gulf. Russian electronic warfare system Melodina countered a swarm of UAVs in Syria successfully. While US managed to assassinate General Qasem of Iran, but at the same time it was undertaking a mission to kill a Houthi leader in Yemen, and it failed. UAVs have a very high accident rate, and it's more than 4 times that of a manned aircraft. So yes, it's still some distance to go for UAV, but it's becoming a challenge. Despite these shortfalls, UAVs that can attack precisely pose a considerable threat. More so as the capability available is commercial with no effective counter. The balance is tilted in favor of anyone who wants to use UAV as an aggressive tool. While several systems are available to counter UAVs, they can shoot them down, trap them in a net, disable their navigation system, jam the GPS, use the electromagnetic warfare systems to cut out the communication. But it is practically impossible to win a contest with a swarm of UAVs by using just defensive systems. A UAV swarm is a real threat with no easy answers. Once artificial intelligence develops further and finds its way into UAVs, the security challenge will escalate manifold. The only possible solution will be to develop AI-enabled counter UAV. That will be at least a decade from now. The security establishment will have to live with this threat till then. Aggressive measures are the only way to mitigate this threat. And that is all I have to say for now. Thank you.
Khera, for this interesting talk on drones and hybrid warfare. Our next speaker is Dr. Ellie Carman, who is a senior research scholar at the International Institute of Counterterrorism at Herzliya and a senior research fellow at the Institute for Policy and Strategy at the Interdisciplinary Center at Herzliya, Israel. Apart from his several other achievements, he also served as advisor to the Israeli Ministry of Defense and the Anti-Semitism Monitoring Forum of the Israeli Government Secretariat. And as you know, Israel has been in the forefront of anti-drone measures. They have enormous expertise as far as operating drones are concerned and how to handle them. So without wasting much time, I'll request Dr. Ellie to start. He would have a PowerPoint. So over to Dr. Ellie Carman. Dr. Carman would be speaking on drones and terrorism.
Okay. Sorry. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. And I'm honored to speak at this professional panel on a subject which is very, very important, but at the same time is very complex and relatively new. I'm honored to speak in the invitation of the India Foundation, and I'll try to present a kind of overview picture of the threat and the challenges of drone terrorism. And as you know, Israel has been challenged just recently in May this year, by drones sent by Hamas from the Gaza Strip, and I'll mention it at the end of my presentation. So in July 2010, the United States Defense Intelligence Agency, the DIA, intercepted electronic communications indicated that senior Al-Qaeda leaders had distributed a strategic guide to operatives around the world, advising them how to anticipate and defeat unmanned aircraft. Al-Qaeda was sponsoring simultaneous research projects to develop jammers to interfere with GPS signals and infrared tags that drone operators rely on to pinpoint missile targets. So this was a kind of defensive strategy of Al-Qaeda, but they already understood how important are the drones in the fight between the two camps. Other projects included the development of small radio-controlled aircraft by Al-Qaeda, or hobby planes, which insurgents apparently saw as having potential for monitoring the flight patterns of the United States drones. That same year, the CIA noted in a report that Al-Qaeda was placing special emphasis on the recruitment of technicians with expertise in drone technology, because indeed this is a very technological field in which you need technicians of various kinds, not only the drone itself, which is flying, but also electronic warfare, cameras, and so on. So the Islamic State in Iraq and Al-Sham, the famous ISIS, and other violent non-state actors use the technology available on the consumer market to build or purchase small drones they qualified or modified into killer bees, capable of creating significant damage and terrorizing civilians, but also militaries. Drones can be used in various ways. For instance, for surveillance on the battleground, strategic communication, transportation, for instance, smuggling weapons or smuggling other things, disruption of events, complementing other activities, or as a weapon in itself. Example, suicide drones. The first recorded successful attack by terrorists using drones was in mid-2013, when Hezbollah, organization was active already in Syria, reportedly dropped 2 small explosive devices on Syrian rebel opposition strongholds using a drone supplied by Iran. So we understand from this moment that actually Hezbollah has most of its capabilities by supplies from Iran itself. In 2015, Kurdish fighters in Syria, in northern Syria, shot down multiple small commercial drones which were laden with explosives, which belonged to ISIS, which at that time was attacking Kurdish territory. In 2016, ISIS announced the establishment of what they called unmanned aircraft of the Mujahideen unit, whose purpose was to engineer drones for the group to deploy in combat. During coalition forces operations, for instance, to regain Mosul in June 2017, ISIS flew more than 100 drones to attack the coalition forces and the Iraqi forces every month. Al-Qaeda has taken inspiration from these events And it planned, for instance, to use drones to take down airliners using explosive-laden drones at airports in the United States and the United Kingdom. They didn't arrive to implement this strategy, but they thought about it. In most cases, ISIS used do-it-yourself techniques to combine high and low-tech components purchased from various connections across Asia and Europe. What's interesting is the program appears to have been shaped by two Bangladeshi jihadist brothers who recruited other operatives to work alongside them in a kind of international network. They created a series of shell companies to acquire consumer drones from manufacturers in Asia, United States, and Canada. Then they use other shell companies to purchase components, such as cameras, GPS units, before activating them on the drones themselves. While the eventual capture of one of the brothers and the killing of the other one by a drone attack of the United States dismantled this network, the terror group the ISIS was still able to obtain drones through other connections. As jihadists began using drones, they also began to share technology with each other, including technology they obtained from the United States drones that they captured or they were downed in the battleground. If we speak of the Sunni jihadists, ISIS reportedly began using drones in terrorist activities from 2013 in Syria and Iraq, were the main battleground for the constitution of the Islamic State. They use it for spreading propaganda, reconnaissance, and attacks. In August 2014, for instance, it uploaded propaganda images on the internet of aerial shots taken of bases of hostile forces in Raqqa, which at that time was beginning to be a capital of ISIS in northern Syria, which was its first public display of using drones. From 2016 to 2017, it loaded bombs onto drones and dropped them from the air in successive attacks. As ISIS-controlled areas were scaled down in Syria and Iraq beginning 2017, opportunities for drone usage also decreased. Still, drones were discovered in hideouts of ISIS fighters in Iraq in September 2019, only 2 years ago. Jihadi discussions about drones on the social media, on websites and forums include topics such as planning the attacks, hacking drones, modifying commercially available drones, building homemade drones, and developing methods to disrupt and down Western and rival jihadi groups' drones, because there are also a fight between, for instance, Al-Qaeda and ISIS in Syria itself. The commercial drones used by the Islamic State have weighed about 50 pounds or less, in addition to using drones with full motion video to look for attack opportunities and to monitor the Iraqi security forces. The pilotless aircraft are also used to provide target information for vehicle carrying suicide bombs. For instance, they sent a lot of vehicles which were cars or trucks, suicide bombers, that they monitor them through the drones in order to be sure that they will attain the specific target that was involved in the attack. In October 2014, the leading English language ISIS disseminator on Twitter tweeted a link to a PDF file which was titled The Beginner's Guide to Multicopters, which provides instruction on how to build entry-level multi-rotor drones. In 2016, the Al-Qaeda affiliated Uyghur anti-China jihadi group Turkestan Islamic Party, the TIP, which is even today active mainly in northern western Syria in Idlib province, released videos documenting the group's assault on grain silos in Hama in Syria, and footage for recon and documentation of the battle, and also remote control car bombs. One video featured drone footage showing a suicide attack by this organization, the TIP, against enemy forces in an apartment complex, and they mentioned that they killed 40 Iranians in this one attack. In 2016, a pro-Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula Telegram channel posted a list of 17 suggestions for lone wolf attacks during the 2016 Rio de Janeiro Olympics. And among these suggestions was to use small explosives used to be on toy drones. Boko Haram, which is the main jihadist organization active in northern Nigeria, and in nearby countries use drones in its attacks against the security forces. And Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, which is mainly posted in Yemen, in southern Yemen, they use the internet to call on the group to carry out similar attacks as the one targeting the Saudi Arabian oil facilities in September 2019, which was a huge attack by very sophisticated drones of Iran. And I'd like to show you some captured arsenals of ISIS manufactured drones. I hope that I can use it now. Sorry, one moment. Okay, you see here one of the ISIS manufactured drones called Sky Hunter, and its estimated flight time is 1 hour and a half, and the range some 7 kilometers. Other ones, like this one, is modified DJI, which is a Chinese very known drone for payload delivery. It can be used with for surveillance with a camera, but also dropping explosives or trying to monitor a suicide attack. Now to the Shia and pro-Iranian jihadists, which are advantaged by the fact that they are supported by the Iran, which is, as we know, a rogue state in this field. In December 2009, the Iran-backed Iraqi militants had hacked into video feeds of American Predator and Shadow drones, which is important information in order to defend themselves. And they passed this information to the Hezbollah. And this was the first occasion that Iran decided to provide drones to its proxies, the Hezbollah in Lebanon, but also the proxies, Shia proxies in Syria, in Iraq, and the Shia Houthis in Yemen. A video released in August 2016 by a Hezbollah-affiliated media outlet appeared to confirm that Hezbollah is using attack drones dropping Chinese-made MSD-2 cluster bombs on 3 Syrian rebel positions, which is opposition to the Bashar regime in Syria, outside the city of Aleppo. Hezbollah has claimed to have this capacity since September 2014. In March 2017, a spokesman of the Iran-backed Iraqi Shia militia Al-Nujaba highlighted the military's activity in Iraq and Syria, and they published images which show that the militia is operating Iranian drones. For instance, Ababil will see it immediately. The Hezbollah's first flight of an unmanned aerial vehicle into Israeli airspace is Mirzat drone, also an Iranian-based drone, updated version of the early Iranian Mohajer drone for reconnaissance purposes. This occurred in November 2004, so you see very soon, a long time ago. It hovered over the Western Galilee in Israel and the city of Nahariya for about 20 minutes, and the Israeli Air Force couldn't challenge it and down it. Hezbollah launched in August 2006, during the Second Lebanon War, 3 small Ababil drones into Israel, each carrying a 40 to 50 kilogram explosive warhead intended for bombing strategic targets. This time, F-16 Israeli fighters destroyed all these attempts by Hezbollah. The next appearance of Hezbollah drone was in October 2012, when a very successful drone by Hezbollah called Ayub, this was its name at that time, flew south from the Gaza Strip through the Mediterranean Sea and entered 35 miles into the Negev, which is the desert in southern Israel, penetrated to a point near the Dimona nuclear reactor of Israel. And there it was destroyed by the Israeli aircraft. Now, as I said, Hamas is using also the last 2-3 years drones. We see here on the left, if you see, they try, for instance, to smuggle through the border when we send humanitarian aid to the population in Gaza. And here you see, we found hundreds of small market drones, which they bought under kind of toys or agriculture machines, and they tried to smuggle. Our security forces and the customs discovered it. In 2018, already Hamas began to employ suicide drones, each carrying a small amount of explosives. We know that they intend to use this kind of attacks, and we see immediately one of these attacks in the May 2021 operation, if you want, in Gaza. The Palestinian Islamic Jihad also used one such drone, for instance, when they tried to attack an Israeli tank which was deployed on the border with Gaza Strip. You see here the kind of drone that they used, and they didn't succeed to do it. But more seriously, we see what happened during the May 2021 operation. This is a Shehab suicide drone by Hamas. Actually, it's a Iranian Arbil drone, which was fabricated by Hamas with Iranian support and technology and knowledge in Gaza itself during various years. And they sent some 4, 5, or 6 drones of this kind. You'll see immediately how it works. All of them was destroyed by the Israeli Air Force, which means that there is still today, I think, some kind of response for this threat by Israel. And here you see the video, which was posted by the Hamas, because they consider it to be a successful operation, at least as a propaganda operation. Here is the movie. You see, they are technicians and monitors of this kind of, they are quite well prepared. So you see how they use the propaganda in order to threaten the Israeli population and say, look how successful we are. In this case, they were not successful at all. And we know that Israel has succeeded actually in if you want to challenge this threat. And by the way, Hamas had a very important project outside the Gaza Strip. They used engineer in Tunisia, a Tunisian engineer, and a Palestinian engineer in Malaysia. These two guys were specialized in building and trying to improve the capabilities of the existence drones in the Hamas hands. And the two of them, one in Tunisia and one in Malaysia, were killed 1 or 2 years, according to foreign media, by the Israeli Mossad. But there is another threat that is looming and is considered to be very threatening by the international community, the use of chemical and biological weapons with this kind of drones. And we see here some declaration of Gilles de Kerchove, which is the European Union's counterterrorism coordinator until today. He warned in 2017 that homegrown jihadists in Europe could use drones to drop biological weapons on crowded public spaces. And here, down here, you see the declaration of an English member of the cabinet in the United Kingdom, who said, probably based on some information the British security services had, that there is a possibility that jihadists will use drones to launch a chemical attack in the UK. And there is information and also the evaluation that the Abarbil Iranian UAV can be used also to charged with chemical agents, not really weapons, but at least agents that the terrorists themselves produce. Sorry, one moment. I want to leave it. Anyway, to conclude, I'll say that small drone attacks on critical infrastructure and personnel from Lebanon to Yemen have demonstrated how conventional air defenses, either anti-missile defenses or even the aircrafts, military aircraft, are incapable of detecting smaller intruders. We had at least 2 examples with Hezbollah, and it was a very challenging experience for the Israeli Air Force. Although most of the known incidents and attacks took place outside Europe, it seems that most of the drones used by the Sunni jihadist organizations were bought on the open market by the existing network of jihadists in the West. Moreover, the members of jihadist groups and supporters were instructed how to purchase, to improve, or even construct such drones by themselves, and rules were encouraged to use them against civil targets in the West. Therefore, it can be evaluated that part of this knowledge is already in the hands of jihadist individuals, because these manuals have been disseminated on all channels, and the videos disseminated give motivation for their emulation in the urban environment in Europe and beyond. This threat is enhanced by some of the foreign fighters, returnees to Europe and elsewhere, who possibly were involved on the ground in Syria, Iraq, Libya, in drone operations. For instance, we know that ISIS has a quite important presence in Afghanistan, even fighting Taliban, and we don't know how they are able to use this kind of technology or capabilities in Afghanistan and from Afghanistan outside. The situation is different concerning the Shia pro-Iranian organizations, because they are the ones which have the advantage of being supported by a regime using indiscriminate terrorism worldwide, and very much involved in developing drone technologies by themselves. The Hezbollah, Hamas, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and the Houthis in Yemen are already active actors in this field on the battleground. For the moment, only in the Middle East, but we don't know how they will act in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Ali. Our next speaker is Air Vice Marshal Manmohan Bahadur, who retired from the Indian Air Force after 36 years of distinguished service. He's an experimental test pilot from the French Test Pilot School, a graduate of the Air Command and Staff College, USA, and a postgraduate in Defense and Strategic Studies from Madras University. He was, till recently, the Additional Director General of Center for Air Power Studies, and he'll be speaking on terror drones, challenges and responses. But before I request AVM Bahadur to speak for next 10 to 15 minutes, I'd like to inform all the participants that on completion of the speakers, we would be having an interaction. Those desirous of asking questions or making brief comments could use raise hands option, which is at the bottom of your screen, or type out a question or comment in the chat box, which will be read by me or my colleague. Over to AVM Bahadur, please.
Thank you, Alok, and good afternoon, everyone. It's nice to see Alok virtually, actually. He and I were together directing staff at our Defense Services Staff College many years ago. And it's good to interact with somebody whom you've rubbed shoulders with and spoken about educating each other. So now, challenges and responses. The advantage of possibly speaking after 2 or 3 speakers is that many points have already been covered. So what I would be doing is not speaking about them, but taking on from where they have left. Challenges, that's the first part of the remit given to me. Now, there are 2 challenges of these drones. One is, of course, the physical damage, which the speakers have spoken about, the fact that people may get killed, people may get injured, or installations destroyed. If that drone in Jammu, the explosive had hit a helicopter or 2, if it had hit a hangar, then the damage would have been much more. So one is the physical damage. More importantly, and I repeat, more importantly, is the psychological effect. Just to convey a point, this is the 3rd such webinar that I am taking part in. I've taken part in 2 or 3 TV interviews and written 1 article, and the media is full of this plethora. Suddenly, drones have come into into the view of common man, and the common man is worried. So the psychological impact of those 2 drone strikes in Jammu is much more than any damage that they could have caused, because it affects the psyche, number one. It forces the government to react because the public wants action, to commit resources, which possibly, certainly they were coming for anti-drone measures, But this has taken such a path that much more has to be diverted from somewhere else. So we need to watch out not only for the physical part, but the psychological impact it has on the common man. So it is important that while we acknowledge that it is a very potent threat, but that we do not overstate it. Because the point is, how many things can one protect in a country of the size of India? Israel is small. It knows it's being targeted. India is huge. So we have to take measures to protect our vital areas and vital points. So which are those vital areas? Is one more important than the other? As I said, you can't protect everything. So there has to be a graded, shall I say, a list made out in terms of the importance. Is, for example, an army installation or army unit more important than a nuclear installation, which may be in the hinterland? What about if tomorrow, to create noise, can you imagine a drone strike on a university hostel, which affects or injures students, young boys and girls? So these are the intricacies, these are the challenges that face the government of any country, especially of India, because of our unique security challenges. So we need to make a graded list. I'll come to that in the responses. But one more point on the challenges. There need to be some legalities, some rules made out. Because as per a study by, I think, FICCI or CII, our agencies, there are almost 4 to 5 lakh UAVs of the size, the small one, the drones, available in the country. But the number of drones registered officially with the Ministry of Civil Aviation, which is the nodal authority, are just about 25,000. 4 lakhs versus registered 25,000. Where are the others? Who has got them? So these are massive challenges. So do we require some sort of like we have a gun control law? All of us, none of us can buy a gun without a license. So, these are issues that come up. Okay. So now let's come to the responses. Many people say they should all form part of an air defense structure. Certainly. But you cannot overload the air defense structure of a nation run by the Air Force. With the threat of these small drones coming, there is something, it is different than air policing. It's different than air policing. Once again, I say, do not compare Israel with India. Israel is small. India is huge. So, do we need to get some sort of an air policing structure going? The two cannot be mixed. That means the air defense network and the air policing that needs to be done all over, including the hinterland. Okay. Now, air policing would have to be based on internal rules. The Air Force is very clear, which is charged with the air defense. Anything coming across the border is hostile from the other side and not registered with us or by our air defense network. And there are various gradations the way you do that. So, as I said, you need to have a gradation policy and equipment depending on the importance of the target. Every target, every installation which can be a target cannot have the same type of equipment, same quality, same numbers, for the simple reason that they are costly, and especially in these COVID times, even if COVID was not there, the drain on the exchequer would be huge. So you have to grade, as I said, and accordingly protect them with suitable equipment. And since you cannot protect everything, there are other agencies that come in. It is vital, absolutely vital, that the intelligence agencies, the IB, the Intelligence Bureau, the Research and Analysis Wing, RAW, the state agencies, their intelligence setups, they keep a watch on the bad guy. Human intelligence is so very important to preempt such launches and such strikes. Everybody who owns a drone is not a threat, is not a culprit. As it was said in the inaugural messaging by Alok, by Captain Bansal, was that every wedding that you have now in India, there is a drone operator who takes a video. Now, he is not a rogue guy. But if he is a rogue person, the Intelligence Bureau must be keeping tabs on him. Should be. That's what good intelligence is all about. So, when you're talking of having a structure, we have to incorporate our intelligence gathering agencies in this structure that we make. So, when you have to address a drone threat, I am not talking of those high altitude, long endurance, medium altitude, long endurance, of the Heron or of the Searcher class. Those are military machines, unmanned aerial vehicles. We are all talking of the small ones. So, you need to detect them, as the first speaker, Group Captain Khera, brought out. You have to detect them, localize them, engage them, destroy or capture them. The challenge is of its small size, of its small radar cross section. The fact that its aural signature, the sound it makes, is very low. You can hear it just about maybe 200, 300 odd meters because the engines are battery powered. They're basically propellers battery powered. So you have to have a combination of certain, basically they are millimetric wave radars, sensors which sense the acoustics. So you have those millimetric radars, the acoustic sensors, the sensors which detect anomalies in radio frequencies and find out if he's being guided by an operator. So these are the measures that you take. And with all that, the warning available to the defender is very little, very little. Now comes the catch. Here, automation would be coming in if it has not already come in. And I'll give you an example to show that it has come in. And that's where artificial intelligence comes in. Incorporating artificial intelligence to beat the tyranny of time. That leads us to, lethal autonomous weapon systems. So since there is not enough time available to the attacker to see where he's going to attack, or to the defender, do you give autonomy? Now I'm looking into the future. Do you give autonomy to a machine based on its own artificial intelligence that has been incorporated in it to take a decision to start firing? Because that firing can take a human life. And if we think that we are talking, I am talking something which is not true, well, actually, a United Nations report, and it's available on the net. Please have a look. It's available on the net. It actually says that in Libya, the Turks have used this against the rebels out there. They have fired the Cargo 2 lethal autonomous drone, giving it permission to take a decision to engage human beings. And I read out from there, which says, this is a United Nations report. It says, logistics convoys and retreating HAF troops were subsequently hunted down and remotely engaged by lethal autonomous weapon systems such as the STM Cargo-2. The lethal autonomous weapon systems were programmed to attack targets without requiring data connectivity between the operator and the munition. In effect, a true fire, forget, and find capability. Unquote. What does this show? This is a pointer to the criticality of time to ensure maximum gain from the capability of the UAVs, that's for the attacker, and for the defender, since he has hardly any time, does he get automation ongoing? So these are the threats, these are the challenges which are there, and certain responses that I feel we as a state need to take. It'll cost a lot of money, especially in COVID-19 times. How much can the government divert to which all sectors to protect which all installations, and let's not forget important persons. That's so vital. So many examples were given earlier by Group Captain Khera. There are many more important personages. But just remember, besides the physical damage, it's the psychological effect that we also need to consider. Thank you.
Thank you, Aviam Bahadur. Our last but not the least, our last speaker is Dr. V. Kamakoti, who is a member of the India's National Security Advisory Board. More importantly, he is a professor at the Department of Computer Science and Engineering at the Indian Institute of Technology, Madras. He's been appointed the chairperson of the Task Force on Artificial Intelligence to explore possibilities to leverage artificial intelligence for development across various fields. He has specialization in theoretical computer science. I'll request him to speak on drone warfare and Indian preparedness, because he's the best man who's privy to what our capabilities are. Over to Professor Kamakoti. Sir, next 15 minutes, over to you.
Okay. Thank you, sir, and thank you for this opportunity. I'll keep my whole talk very brief, because I think we have 15 more minutes to complete the session. So how much time I have, sir?
12 to 15 minutes.
12 to 15 minutes. Okay. So I just split it into three parts. One is the software preparedness, the hardware preparedness, and then the defensive capability. So we'd like to take it into three parts. Now let us start with the software today. India is a software major, and we are very, very adept in making specifically what we call as these embedded software. With a lot of resilience built in, these softwares will be fail-safe. Software will be reactive. The software can be with a very small, memory footprint, because the drones are memory hungry, power hungry, and we could not afford to have large amount of memory. The software also will have lot of capabilities in terms of, edge, what we call as edge intelligence. Edge intelligence essentially means that we are talking about image processing with multiple sensors, getting the multiple sensor inputs, doing what we call as a multi-sensor fusion, doing image processing, doing certain other sort of parameter measurement. Maybe it can be even temperature or other things about the environment. And then bringing these things together into an aggregate framework, and probably giving a sort of a control to the base station from which it is launched. So developing the software has lot more of technology and the different types of skill set that is needed, and I think we are very much on that. So today, when we look at, we have very good what we call as edge intelligence algorithms, which can basically do with very less amount of power consumption and with very less amount of what we call as the time to react. intelligent algorithms would be put there, which can basically learn from the images and take actions there. So there is a capability within us to make decisions on the fly at the drone without actually communicating back to the base station. And there are a lot of algorithms developed and published by our own groups within India. Now, how is this becoming important? The importance here comes from the fact that these algorithms sort of becomes vendor agnostic or chipset agnostic. They look at a generic framework on top of which these things are built, so that any commercially off-the-shelf or any other drone that comes with certain basic compute functionalities in the place. Am I audible?
You are audible.
Okay. Maybe this is because of my mask. I got a comment. Okay. So, so there is this basic functionality that is needed, and that is certainly available within our framework, where we can generate these type of algorithms. We can put deep learning. We can put spiking neural networks, these advanced techniques, which can be extremely useful for the type of edge applications and decision making at the drone level without coming to a base station where a command needs to go. So building these type of intelligent drones, as one of the speaker actually mentioned, is going to be extremely important activity, and there we do have very good expertise. The point is that there are multiple startups. Even within IIT Madras, I could say there are 7 different startups who have been specializing on algorithms for drones and algorithms for maneuvering the drone, collision detection, and and adjustment, bird avoidance. So a lot of things that could be real-time decisions when you fly a drone, how to track it, how it itself tracks it from obstacles, and how it moves. So many things have come up. The next important thing that we are also looking for is the capability of harnessing different sensors, like one of the other speakers mentioned about millimetric waves, radars, etc. So quick usage of this information and algorithms and that sort of DSP, that digital signal processing, that we can put to basically get these things up and making out software. So this is something that we are very good at. Now, manufacturing these drones, now also we see a good improvement in terms of 3D printing, which can give us very highly accurate, given a design, a very highly accurate manufacturing using different varieties of materials. Because now weight becomes a very important issue, so we can do it with plastic or and other different materials, and that is also something which we are specialized. The last but important thing from the algorithmic and the software perspective is security today. And security, essentially, for example, if the drone is flying high and somebody can take the control of the drone by intercepting it. So we need a lot more of security inbuilt in our software. So we do have very good cryptography teams which have come out with low power encryption schemes, which can basically ensure that when a drone is launched, it is extremely difficult for another party to take control over the drone. So that level of secure information can be put, and the data which is processed by the drone from any command unit from the earth, from the ground, can be basically encrypted, and the drones can basically respond only to proper commands from here. So these are some things that we put at the software level. But the major issue where we need to come out is, of course, the hardware interface. Today, the chipsets, the basic electronic, mainly the chipsets, the programmable processors that we are trying to put there, many of the space grade hardware, and both active and passive, all these are imported, and many of them are black boxes. So we know how to program them, we know how to write these algorithms on top of it, So if you look at a compute system, so the drone essentially has an onboard computer with multiple peripherals in the form of sensor feeding it, and then it does some processing from that, right? When you look at this, there is an hardware layer, then there is an operating system, then there are software application. The hardware per se mainly is a black box now. Many of the drones that are manufactured in the country have this hardware completely uncertified, in the sense that we don't know what is inside. And that really poses a very big threat. We have seen a lot of hardware related threat. One of the recent things that came out in a big company like Intel also, where they had invested a lot of time, energy, manpower to build systems. But the meltdown and the Spectre attack, the hardware vulnerabilities that were reported, essentially took everybody by storm, because those vulnerabilities basically violate the basic trust or the root of security in those systems. So it may not be a malicious intent, but it can also be an accidental intent, like what happened in the case of Meltdown and Spectre that we see on the hardware vulnerability side. But if those things are available, then our drones are susceptible to this. Now, the major challenge again, as one of the speakers mentioned, it is not just the large drones that we are talking of, but it can also be very, very small miniature drones that can fly, say 2 kilometers or 3 kilometers, rather than this large endurance drones. Now, and these can be, the target need not be just military targets, but it can also be civilian targets, right? I can just come and shut down a power cable. I can pull down the power network. I can just go and hit a transformer. So all these simple things can be thing, and these can be, we even call as the stone. So people start throwing stones, right? So that's one way of reporting. One way of whatever you call as a retaliation. The same thing can be that they start throwing simple, not micro, but a little more than micro drones, which can be used to attack civilian targets and civilian infrastructure. That is, so these are this combined with the fact that the hardware is not there with us makes life much more complex. And ultimately, if we want to certify these drones as completely, to a large extent safe or trustworthy, hardware certification is needed. And that is something which we need to work on very seriously, because the drone today, there are some mechanical parts, electronic parts, but the computing and the programming part really becomes the central crux. And if we are not able to establish a root of trust, which is the hardware, and then build a chain of trust on top of it, we are going to be in a very big soup. And that is something that we need to really concentrate in the preparedness of not just a warfare, but in general, a drone environment in the country. Now, coming to the next part, I think a lot of speakers basically talked about it in great detail. One is the detection capability. So many of these drones today, when we look at small drones, probably this cannot be used for a cross-border terrorism or over, say, 10, 15 kilometers, 20 kilometers. But if can be used within the country with, say, some attack, originating an attack within the country and hitting some specific targets. And there, many of these small drones are increasingly now being done using plastics, and that makes it undetectable from the and very, very difficult to be detected through radars. And how many radars can we keep, right? To what is the distance? And then the other bigger challenge that we are seeing, we were just debating a couple of days after the recent attack, what would be the distance by which we can basically detect this, even if it is, if we have these high sophisticated radars, because we need time to retaliate and time to force upon. So that is something that is also becoming a challenge here, and a lot more work need to be done. Now, the other important aspect of this entire thing is the regulations today. So Today, when we say that these are some zones where there's a no-fly zone or stuff, now there are different classification of drones and which drone can fly where, which height, etc. So we are going. There are some drone regulations in place and maybe refined over a period of time. But then putting certain mechanisms to basically see the violations, and that is automating it. And automating it for the entire landscape of the country, that is going to be an extremely complex job. And that is going to open up a very, very important, it's something like an air traffic control, but you do it at every place in the country. And as one of the speakers did mention that every marriage today, drone becomes like a Purohit. Drone is also one entity there. And so that is with this level of thing, and a drone attack in a marriage can also be a thing, right? So because when it comes to attacking civilian targets, we need to be extremely careful. So what do we register, what we don't register, that is another major issue. And all these centers around, we basically we talk about a bit on civilian side because drones, as we see, may be used for fighting, but may be more used for civilian targeting civilians, and that is going to be a major concern, in my opinion, rather than a cross-border terrorism where some of our neighbors launch drone attack on us. And this can become a bigger nuisance. And when it starts, now we should start with even a drone insurance policy. And then there are very big challenges in a drone insurance policy because it is for some way at a site where it creates an issue. It is not that the actor or the driver is in the place. So mapping, what you say as the motor vehicle insurance framework onto a drone insurance framework is not going to match. So why I'm talking about insurance is that when we talk about this policy, again, all the security that we need to enforce for certifying a drone will be, in my opinion, will be dictated by a drone policy, insurance policy, rather than a regulation, because that is where money is involved. And I think that is where the biggest scare is going to come up, and that is something which is evolving. So from an academic perspective, drones keep all of us engaged. I think I have another 12 years of service, and I know I can do the entire thing just looking at drones, because there are so many problems to be solved. Both from the hardware side and also from the regulations and other side, which is having a lot of technical inputs. And the last to sum up the essential what I'm trying to say here, we believe that there is a good preparedness in India to basically handle the software aspects. We can make very intelligent drones. The only biggest drawback for us, probably a very determining drawback as of now, is that we have a very bad hardware availability, and that needs to be basically addressed in a very comprehensive manner. And then detection capabilities have to be in place, not just for critical installations, but also for civilian installations. And that is going to become a bigger challenge for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Kamakote. I think we have still about 10-15 minutes more, and we will take a few questions. But before you make up your mind and start typing in the chat box, I'd like to invite Vanilla Devineni, who's doing LLM in air and space law from University of Leiden, Netherlands, to take about 5 minutes and speak about the regulations that Government of India has imposed actually to control drone operations, etc. Because that will have a major impact on as to how to control operations of drone. And as soon as she finishes, we will take all the questions. I have a few questions on chat box, but not a single raised hand. So over to Devineni for 5 minutes. Devineni, are you there?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Hello.
Go ahead, please.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm delighted to be amongst this gathering today. While the esteemed speakers before me have spoken of the military uses of drones, along with the anti-rogue drone strategies and technologies, I would like to briefly talk about the new drone rules in India and their applicability to the security challenges posed by the operation of civilian drones. As we are all aware with the discussions before, that the military uses of drones is estimated to grow exponentially in the near future. So are the civilian uses of drones, which is projected to have a global market of more than $63 billion by 2025. As noticed, civilian drones may be used by non-state actors, more so anti-social elements, to create havoc against state establishments or even citizenry. One recent example in the newspapers is the drone attack on the Jammu Air Force Station, I'm sure all of you are aware of. It is only recently that the Ministry of Civil Aviation has published the Unmanned Aircraft System Rules, which aim to regulate and monitor the civilian operations of drones in the Indian airspace. The new rules aim to ensure the maximum level of safety in the operation of drones and also cater to the security challenges posed by the drones. The rules permit and regulate all kinds of drone activities, ranging from drones weighing nano drones, which weigh less than 250 grams, to large ones which weigh beyond 150 kgs. It also introduces the concept of authorized persons and requires every stakeholder, whether being a drone operator or a drone owner, an importer of drone, a trader, manufacturer, or even a person interested in research and development of drones, to seek authorization prior to any activity and also register themselves as an authorized owner, operator, trader, or manufacturer. The procedure for obtaining such authorizations are very exhaustive and are elaborately provided under these new rules, which are released in April. These rules also require an authorized person to obtain a security clearance before such authorization is granted. Thereby, you can say for the safety and security reasons, the rules contain that every drone, being a nano or a large, is required to be registered under the rules and provided with a unique identification certificate and a unique identification number for every drone, which is needed to be engraved in an identifiable and visible manner on the drone. And in order to be authorized to fly, every drone prototype is also required to be equipped with all the geofencing facility, a global navigation satellite system, a no permission, no takeoff hardware and software, where a drone can be allowed to take off only with the prior permission of the Directorate General of Civil Aviation, along with the detect and avoid systems and a real-time tracking mechanism. All these provisions provided in the rules help in the identification and tracking of all the drones in the airspace. These tracking systems on civilian drones can be used to identify rogue drones and also communicate the same to the counter-drone systems in place, which can later disrupt or destroy them through the soft or hard kills already mentioned by our esteemed speakers before. While these rules strictly prohibit the operation of drone swarms or the carriage of payload and arms or ammunition and explosives, the areas where the operations of drones are permitted or restricted have also been elaborated under these rules, some of them being in the 5-kilometer radius of the airports are strictly prohibited. The rules also provide for the establishment of a drone traffic management system, which is kind of similar to any air traffic control, to ensure safety and security of all participating stakeholders. And these air traffic control systems for drones, also called as the unmanned traffic management, provide all services required for pre-flight, in-flight, as well as post-flight drones, and is also entrusted to monitor all drone activities in the airspace. So it can be said that the Unmanned Aircraft System Rules 2021, released by the ministry, assist in ensuring and countering the security challenges posed by drones through the mandatory registration provisions, the exhaustive authorization provisions, as well as the establishment of UTM network, also known as the Air Traffic Control Network for drones, through its stringent procedures for permits, licenses, and security clearances. All of these while addressing the security concerns of India only to a limited extent, but as said by our previous speaker, Mr. Kamakoti, that it still acts only as a mere small to a limited extent provide the security concerns, but indirectly also act as a deterrent for the growth of the civil drone market in India with its stringent regulations. With the massive growth of the civilian drone industry globally and the security implications that may be caused by the non-state actors as noticed prior, I believe it is not over-regulation, but a smart regulation which is required that creates a balance between the evolving drone sector and the emerging security concerns. Therefore, it is important that the Indian civilian drone market grows along with ensuring the safety and security of the country. Thereby, I believe that the new Indian rules and procedures of licensing and authorization should be liberalized more based on the risk of operations, an example of which can be taken from the European approach towards that regulation through a risk-based on assessing the risk of every operation. Further, stringent and exhaustive registration, the authorization and licensing measures by themselves are insufficient to counter the security challenges posed by the operation of civilian drones, as noticed with the non-registration of majority of the drones currently now. So we need a counter-drone policy to completely address our security concern. And it is evident that the research and development and manufacturing of a counter-drone policy is still at a nascent stage, which just issued in 2019 by the government. Therefore, India needs to establish a robust counter-drone policy with capabilities to damage hardware, destroy the command and control links, or disrupt the drone by a soft or a hard kill. The anti-drone system, which is known to have been developed by DRDO, which was also showcased on our Independence Day and Republic Day, is still yet to be tested for its efficiency in the defense sector. Therefore, I would also suggest that the rules regulating the operation of civilian drones prescribe monetary penalties for their non-compliance. So, for example, just in the case of a Jammu and Kashmir, in a situation where an individual operates a drone for either surveillance or disruption of critical state infrastructure or creates any security threat to the state, along with its citizenry under these rules, will only be subjected to monetary penalty. So these rules do not prescribe any penal action. So in my opinion, these rules need to include provisions to make the operation of civilian drones, which threaten national security, an offense, subjected to penal action by courts. Further, the research and development and the indigenous manufacture of drones should also be incentivized, along with the import of various counter-drone technologies by our friends around the world, being Israel or the United States of America. With a few slight amendments like these and the growth potential of the Indian drone sector, I believe it will not be late for India to be the leading country for safe and secure civilian drone operations. With that, I really thank India Foundation and Sri Ram Madhav ji for this opportunity and express my views before this gathering. And thank you all for a patient hearing.
Thank you, Vanilla. We now have a few questions. I can see Professor Vikas Parekh and Dr. Mahapatra Anukul. First, Professor Vikas Parekh, over to you. Please unmute yourself. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Some of my queries have already been answered by the previous speakers. I think besides border security and other security threats, I mentioned that there are concerns related to invasion of privacy by even licensed drones and possible espionage also in sensitive areas. My question is how to monitor and regulate. Can we use satellite surveillance, or can we think of having some sort of counter surveillance drones? So that satellite thing, maybe.
Okay. Then we have Dr. Mahapatra. Dr. Aniket Mahapatra. You may ask your question. Is he there, or I'll read it out his? Dr. Aniket Mahapatra's question is, what will be the probable strategy to defend the various stages of drones? On the other hand, how we could use it to confront our enemies? This is a very simple question, which I am addressing it to all the speakers. You could take your time and answer it as you. There is also a question which is in the chat box that Mr. R.L. Francis has said that the drones are nothing but a proxy war against India. And as far as strategic preparedness is concerned, the armed forces do not have that sort of power to deal with them. And our bureaucracy has not been very effective in countering them. So is it a time that the armed forces should be given adequate powers to deal with these threats like drones? So these are the three questions. And I'll now request the speakers in the reverse order to take on whatever questions they deem appropriate or make comments. Just 2 to 3 minutes each, starting with Professor Kamakoti. Over to Professor Kamakoti. Anything if you wish to, any of these three questions, if you have any comments on
that. Sorry, the first question I couldn't get. There was a voice breakdown. The second question I got.
He was asking whether we could use satellites to do surveillance.
Yeah. So surveillance. Yeah. So today, I think what we need is a very, very, very fast response time. And so that makes the entire problem very challenging. Satellite-based surveillance may not give us that response time by which we could react and basically launch an anti-drone, whatever that we are trying to do. It can be a manual, somebody shooting it down, or somebody actually going and some the drone which actually goes and drives it away. So whatever we try to do, the reaction time is going to be in very, very short. And so one of the things that we can basically look at is that we need to have, especially for this low flying drones, which in my opinion are going to become the maximum benefit and maximum nuisance value also. So where we put certain high-end cameras, probably acoustic sensors to decode the sound and see if, but as one of the speakers rightly mentioned today, many are battery operated and the sound is very, very less. Then we basically can have some sort of millimetric or a good radar technology using which we need to detect, and this can be put on, say, a sort of say every mobile tower, for example, and that can basically warn as the control room. There should be a sort of a distributed control rooms. One control room cannot do everything, but there can be a distributed drone control traffic sort of web board, which basically monitors and finds out whether this drone can fly there or not, and if there is some violation, etc. So I think this is very, very important. So so this also gives us that if there is some civilian target that is going to be a thing, and somebody starts from some place and comes to hit it, I think there is going to be enough amount of time for us to react before they come closer to this target. This is something that we need to put. This is something practical to do at this point of time. The only thing with satellite is that we may not get real-time interventions. So this is my response.
Thank you. AVM Bahadur, please.
Yeah, the only thing I would say is that it's a threat, fine, and we have covered, the speakers have covered what are the responses and the challenges. All I'm trying to say is we must take this threat seriously, but apply our mind and not go overboard with the hyperbole such that it creates fear psychosis. We need to be careful of this fact. The armed forces are certainly aware, and I'm quite sure the government is also aware of this. So I think we should have confidence in the government of the day that steps would be taken. Yes, one may not like the laws, the rules, the regulations, or maybe the speed, and that's where we need to look into. And hopefully the government will take out money towards this particular.
Thank you. Dr. Ellie Carman.
Yes, I spoke in my presentation mainly about the threat of drones used by terrorist organizations on the battlefield in the Middle East. I mean, Syria, Iraq, Yemen, and even against Israel from Gaza, although I think one of the speakers compared Israel to India. Israel is very small and India is very big. But still, because we are small, we are in danger because the drones can penetrate quite quickly at the center of our country, at the center of our strategic assets. And even if we speak of VIPs, for instance, it's very easy, relatively easy to reach them. But there is another problem, the problem to the threat to the metropolitan urban areas. And in Israel and in India, you have huge cities. And the challenge is how you defend these cities and the civilian especially, but also if you want strategic targets like telephone companies or TV stations from attacks by very small drones, which are on the market. And there is a huge market now, by the way. If I give the example of Israel, Israel is very advanced on the issue of technology and producing new kinds of drones, but on the issue of regulation, it's very complex because who is responsible to defend the urban space? I think the young lady, Vanella, she explained how India is regulating this kind of challenge. And this is the very important issue. In our case, overall, there is a security threat that the Air Force is responsible for it. But what about inside the country? What is the difference between the Civil Aviation Authority and the police? Has the police the sufficient authority in order to not only to take control, for instance, of a drone, but put them on trial, for instance? Today, it's very difficult to do it. You can do it, for instance, for smuggling to a prison, okay, but not the use of drone itself, but the smuggling of the narcotics to the prison. So this is a very difficult, or I would say, very complex issue that should be discussed in detail. I was part of last year of a big European Union project, which dealt exactly with this problem, because all the countries involved in Europe don't have standard. And you can pass from Belgium to France or from Belgium to Netherlands, and you have other laws. And who is responsible in every country? I gave you an example in Israel. For the first time, the police was involved in managing the defense of a huge event. It was the Eurovision in 2019. So the police did not have any doctrine how to do it. It had in 3 weeks to prepare a special force combined with other actors and to declare a free zone over this zone of the Eurovision and introduce new technologies and new things that they were not accustomed to do it. So this was the first example where there is the beginning of what the young lady mentioned, UTM, unmanned management traffic. For instance, only this year we have pilots, because you have the Amazon, you have Google, you have all these companies that want to sell pharmaceutics, food, drugstores, and this is a huge market that will be very, very active in the near future. How you combine this need to monitor this huge traffic and at the same time to defend it against the terrorists or the criminals?
Group Captain Kishore, Khera, your turn.
Yeah, almost everything has been covered. All I would say is it requires a whole of government approach and with all stakeholders put in together. You need to have police, you need to have civil aviation, you need to have military, you need to have industry, you need to have civil society, you need to have academics, you need to have technocrats on board to formulate some kind of a regulation. Right now, it's over-regulated. After Jammu strike, no civilian drones are permitted in Jammu and Kashmir. You cannot develop an industry with that. Yes, there are security challenges. Yes, there are restrictions, but we'll have to find a way out, and everyone has to put their heads together for that. That is all I have to say.
Thank you. We have one more question. Since we started about 10 minutes late, I'll just allow this. Vikas Kalyani has a question. Over to you, Vikas. Quickly.
I think I got the question. Alok.
Vikas?
Yeah, this Kamakoti here.
Sir.
I got the question. He has typed it on the chat, right? Does the fact that drones are power hungry and thus using lightweight encryption make them more susceptible to security attacks? The question and answer is no, in the sense that the reason elliptic curve cryptography specifically targeting, lightweight, low power encryption. You can't say it's lightweight. It is low power encryption, and this can as the breaking of several encryption algorithms in the past, right? It is also that these are complex enough that you cannot break it within, say, 2 to 3 hours, right? And that itself is sufficient for someone to finish off a drone operation and come back. So this is something, the most interesting part of this. So just because we are using lightweight encryption, the way lightweight might be a wrong way to put it. Maybe I should have told that low power encryption. It is in no way trying to compromise the security of the message that is passed or the data that is transmitted.
Thank you, Professor Kamakoti. There was another question from Wing Commander Vikas Kalyani, which I just wanted him to ask if he is here. Vikas, or you could type it if you are not able to speak.
He's muted actually. Yeah, he's unmuted now. Yeah,
you could speak.
Right. Thank you, Alok sir. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
So my question would be to Aviation Bahadur sir. Good to have you here. As I know your work, and you have been pioneer of Operation Meghdoot and also Group Captain Khera. So my simple question is, being a serving Air Force officer and deployed somewhere in the area where the incident has happened, we know that this is the responsibility of the intelligence agency, and we are not supposed to react to it as a knee-jerk reaction. My request is to imagine yourself as the AD commander of the command responsible for the air defense. What would you suggest all these stations as of this moment? How should they prepare themselves if there is intelligence of such attacks happening across Banihal or south of Banihal as well? And what should we do as the forces deploy in the sensitive regions? Sir? Thank you.
Okay, Aviation Bahadur sir, this will be the last answer, and we just...
Yeah, on an open forum, all I can say is we have to detect. So have the detection means. If you have the equipment, deploy. Otherwise, eyeball Mark 1 comes into effect. You have, for example, the bird hazard control team, BHCT, but that's very manpower intensive. You have, the other tasks that are required of people who are posted in the station. So detect, and we have the last ditch measures of engaging those small drones. Remember, we are just talking small drones. So the equipment, if it is available, should detect it. If it is not available at certain places, which may be possible, may not be at bigger airfields, but smaller encampments and things like that, then besides the intelligence part, it is the last ditch putting of manpower that comes in, but that's very manpower intensive. That's about all I can speak in an open forum. If Groupie Khera wants to add on something, Alok, would you permit that?
Sir, I think you have already given whatever is required. I think we'll wind up. We are already almost 16 minutes beyond our stipulated time. So all it's left for me is to thank the speakers who have at a very short notice agreed to speak. And they come all the way, especially to Dr. Ellie Carman, who's agreed to speak from Israel. We had participants from across the globe. And this is a subject which has generated enormous interest. And this is, of course, the first interaction that we have had. We would follow it up with certain more events on the drones, because this is going to be a very, very challenging proposition in days to come. Once again, I thank all the speakers for taking their time out, and all the participants who have actually taken time out, and all of them have logged in from across the globe to listen to this subject, which is of immense importance to you all and to all of us. And I hope all of you will keep attending our events as far as India Foundation is concerned, which we'll keep having from time to time. We will be having some more events virtually before we can start doing them physically as the pandemic subsides. Thank you very much. Looking forward to seeing you in next India Foundation event.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye, Ali.